There's nothing that gets the blood of NBA fans pumping quite the same as a blockbuster trade. When an NBA star gets traded, it sends the entire community into a frenzy. Who won the trade? Who lost the trade? What does this trade mean for the rest of the NBA? Or one of my personal favorites, how this trade will break the NBA. And with teams always looking to improve their roster, to increase their odds at claiming the coveted Larry O'Brien trophy in June, you never know when that next big trade that sets flames to the NBA world could go down. Yo, what is up guys? It's me, Zach Lee, and today we're going to be taking a look at 10 NBA stars who I think have the highest probability to be traded this upcoming season. Before we get into that, go ahead and make sure that you leave a like on this video as well as comment down below what players you think are going to be traded, as interactivity with the videos does help the channel grow. As always, really appreciate it, but now, without further ado, let's get into this. Let's go. Kevin Love has found his name in trade rumors ever since he became the scapegoat for the Cleveland Cavaliers back in 2016. As when Love was forced to take a back seat to both Kyrie Irving and LeBron James in Cleveland's offense, it became clear that it would take time for Love to make such a dramatic adjustment to his game, as the offense for Cleveland saw Love featured as more of just a floor-stretching big man as opposed to the dynamic offensive force of a player that he was during his time with the Wolves. And even though some fans will continue to lament the fact that, quote, Love isn't as good as he used to be, Love's production as a third option on a team that would eventually win an NBA championship was actually nothing to scoff at, as he was able to average 19 points per game to go along with 11 rebounds during the Cavs championship run. Now though that the Cavs are no longer looking to compete and have recently signed Kevin Love to a contract extension that will guarantee him around $30 million a season until the summer of 2023, the 30-year-old Love still figures to be one of the more prominent names on the open trade market, with a bevy of teams who could be interested in his services, most notably the Portland Trail Blazers, as after adjusting to life as a third option, Love will fit in perfectly alongside Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum in Portland, providing the club with a third star that they've been looking to pair next to their dynamic duo for years now. As for what it will cost Portland, the contracts of Whiteside and Love do match up quite nicely. As for why the Cavs would entertain the deal, well, it would provide Cleveland with some immediate cap space relief, as while Love isn't slated to come off the books till the summer of 2023, the contract of Whiteside is set to expire after this season. And if the Blazers throw in a couple of future first-round draft picks between the deal, then Portland will now have a far better chance of finally escaping the Western Conference. D'Angelo Russell signing with the Golden State Warriors this summer was one of the moves that no one saw coming. The team that already had one of the best backcourts in the NBA somehow managed to improve their guard depth even more. And unless Klay Thompson is comfortable playing full-time at the small forward position, or D'Angelo Russell accepts a new role off the bench, then another move that could happen for Golden State will be using Russell as a trade piece later down the line. As a first-time All-Star, we'll be able to fetch a huge return for the Warriors in the open trade market. And speaking of the open trade market, the market for D'Lo will be so wide that I could list about half of the teams in the NBA as potential trade suitors, making it nearly impossible to determine where he could end up if he was to be traded. But off the top of my head, I would expect teams such as the Miami Heat, Orlando Magic, Detroit Pistons, Phoenix Suns, Minnesota Timberwolves, Chicago Bulls, and maybe even the Indiana Pacers to all jump at the chance to add the dynamic young guard to their roster. I can't remember the last time there was so much uncertainty surrounding a team that just won an NBA championship. Depending on factors such as how much better both Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby return this upcoming season, the Raptors could be a lot more competitive in the East than people are giving them credit for. However, if the season progresses and it turns out the Raptors aren't as competitive as they could be, Kyle Lowry being traded as a one-year rental to a team in need of an upgrade at the point guard spot is far from unrealistic. Even though the 33-year-old guard, who will be making $33 million this season, had a down year scoring the ball, only averaging 14 points per game, that was more out of necessity for the offense that the Raptors were running as opposed to a steep decline in the play of the guard, as he was still one of the best distributors that the league had to offer, averaging over 8 assists per game. And with his return to the Raptors up in the air should he hit open free agency next summer, I fully expect the Raptors to evaluate all of their options as the 2020 trade deadline approaches. And one team in particular that I think could be interested in the service of Lowry would be the Detroit Pistons. With his former head coach Dwayne Casey at the helm for Detroit, it wouldn't be hard to imagine why the Pistons would have interest in Lowry, as he does present a bit of an upgrade over the point guard spot over Reggie Jackson, as even though Jackson may just be a bit more dynamic at times when it comes to scoring the ball, in terms of overall leadership ability and decision making and just about every other aspect of his game, Kyle Lowry trumps Jackson, and the extra leadership, consistency, and a good understanding of Dwayne Casey's offensive system and philosophies would see Detroit rise up a bit more in the Eastern Conference. The San Antonio Spurs are still in a bit of a weird situation when it comes to how competitive they're going to be in the Western Conference. While officially adding Tim Duncan to the coaching staff as well as having DeJounte Murray return from his injury should help the Spurs improve a bit over the 7th seed finish last year, it still won't be enough for them to be considered real threats in the Western Conference. And with both of their stars, DeMar DeRozan as well as LaMarcus Aldridge, trying to become free agents sooner rather than later, should the trade deadline approach and the Spurs find themselves once again competing for one of the bottom seeds out west, trading one or both of their star players could be an option for the Spurs look into. And one very interesting situation for LaMarcus Aldridge in particular would be a return to the Portland Trail Blazers, as he has said before that he and Damian Lillard have discussed teaming up again before Aldridge hangs it up. And should the Cavs ask for too much for love, or the Blazers feel a reunion with Aldridge is a better fit, it could be something to look out for. Another place Aldridge could end up though is with the Boston Celtics. The Celtics lost out on Al Horford over the summer and replaced him with Enes Kanter. And while Kanter is a force to be reckoned with on the offensive glass as well as in the low post in general, there's no question that Aldridge will be a big upgrade for Boston over what they currently have in their front court. As for DeRozan, there aren't many teams that immediately come to mind, as they think he will be a bit of an awkward fit for most teams offensively. But just like Lowry, should DeRozan become available, I'd expect Dwayne Casey to make a hard pitch to the Pistons front office to reunite him with a favorite player in the league. Speaking of the Pistons though, they're not a team that's necessarily immune to the possibility of trading away their star players either, as even though Blake Griffin had a monster year for Detroit last year, the Pistons still finished the season with just a 41-41 record, and even though the addition of Derrick Rose should give the Pistons bench a big boost in productivity, they're still not expected to be real threats in the East this upcoming season without making some sort of massive trade. And should that massive trade not present itself, another option for the team could be selling the assets that they have and rebuilding around young players such as Luke Kennard, Bruce Brown, and newly drafted Sekou Doumbouya. So with all that being said, should they receive a nice enough offer or decide to put either up on the trade block, then Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin could find themselves on new teams this upcoming season. As for what teams could be interested in the two all-star big men, well, I think the Sacramento Kings could be an intriguing option for Drummond to end up, as they are in need of an upgrade at the center position if they really want to make the playoffs in the competitive West. Another more far-fetched option though would be the Golden State Warriors should the Warriors feel that Willie Cauley-Stein is not panning out for them, as it will be interesting to see one of the best offensive rebounds that the league has ever had to offer play alongside Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, grabbing their occasional misses from beyond the arc and then dishing it back out to them to try again. As for Blake Griffin, with the way he played last season, a good majority of the league would still be interested in adding him to their roster. Most notably though, I think that the Miami Heat or the Phoenix Suns would be some of the more aggressive Griffin pursuers. And if you remember, before he signed a 5-year max deal with the Clippers, the frontrunners to sign Griffin away from LA was actually the Phoenix Suns, as Griffin listed the franchise as a favorite basketball city outside of Los Angeles, and adding Griffin to the roster could give the Suns the boost necessary in order to appease Devin Booker's desire to compete. The fact that Bradley Beal hasn't signed his name to the max contract extension with the Washington Wizards yet is likely an indicator that he is contemplating requesting a trade out of Washington. The trade rumors around Beal were swirling like crazy early in the summer, and we'd all be just as crazy to assume that they won't continue up until the NBA trade deadline, as the 26-year-old shooting guard will be one of, if not the hottest commodity in the open trade market should Washington make him available. And for that reason, similar to D'Angelo Russell, picking out a specific trade partner for Beal would be borderline impossible, since there aren't many teams out there who would turn down the opportunity to land one of the best shooting guards in the entire NBA, as I think the Magic, Hawks, Pistons, Mavericks, Pelicans, Bucks, Celtics, and possibly even the Lakers could all be potential suitors for Beal's services. There's not a player in the NBA that's done more losing over the last 4 years than Devin Booker, and the pressure he put on the Suns to start winning over the summer of 2018 when he said that he was done not making the NBA playoffs was tremendous, and this pressure was put on Phoenix only for them to respond by winning just 19 games last season, even less than the 21 games that they won in 2018. So with that being said, if the Phoenix Suns are once again at the bottom of the barrel come time for the trade deadline, or even the season concludes, Devin Booker deciding that he's had enough and demanding a trade for the Suns wouldn't shock too many people at all. As for any team hoping to trade for Devin Booker, well, they had better be ready to give up every single asset that they have and then some in order to land the still just 22-year-old shooting guard who already has some of the highest scoring games in league history. If there's another player in the league who may be able to understand the frustration Devin Booker is going through, it's one of his best friends in the league, Karl Anthony Towns. Now, Towns' first few years in the league haven't been as rough as Booker's, but that's not to say that they've been terrific either. To no fault of his own, the Wolves just haven't been able to figure out a winning strategy to put around Towns, just like they failed to do with the other great big men of the past in Kevin Garnett and Kevin Love, as both those players eventually found their ways out of the icy tundras of Minnesota. Ironically, Even though they can never get it done in Minnesota, both those players also went on to win championships with the teams that traded for them. So if there's one thing that bodes well for Towns, is that there's a good chance the next team he's on will at the very least be a lot more competitive than the Wolves have been for the majority of his career. Since as it stands right now, the Wolves are once again looking like they're going to find themselves on the outside of the playoffs looking in, with no real means of improving drastically enough to change their current situation. With that being the case, people may soon start to wonder just how much more disappointing seasons can Towns endure before he realizes that it's time to move on. And that's actually going to do it for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, don't forget to go ahead and drop a sub as well as leave a like. And I do want to say that I left Chris Paul off this list, and a lot of you guys might have noticed that already, that Chris Paul wasn't on there, and that's mainly because everyone already expects him to be traded anyways, so I didn't feel like including him for that reason. Also the reason that I already made an entire video talking about where Chris Paul very well could end up earlier in the summer. So if you guys want to see that, it's back on the channel, or I'll have a link to it down in the description box below. Thank you once again for watching though. You guys already know that you are the real MVPs, but with all of that being said, until next time, keep getting the bucks, Team SDC, and I'm out of here. Peace!